Good day, Android Studio coders. This is Lansky from Android Online Academy. Our topic for today is how to make an Android Studio calling app. So the reason I presented this topic in this Android Online Academy is that there is an opportunity to earn advertising income from calling apps because for every country, for example, you're at India, Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, China, even the United States, there are critical numbers that a person needs to call, or for example, contact centers, call centers, police emergency numbers, hospital emergency numbers, and many other numbers that people needs to memorize. But it is really difficult for everyone to be able to memorize that number. So you as a programmer could provide a calling app wherein there is just a button with a specific label, for example, police emergency, hospital emergency, or fire emergency, and the only thing that the user of the app would do is to tap on that number and the app would make the call to that number. So it's very easy. For example, there are more than 20 numbers to memorize, emergency numbers and critical numbers that a user may not know when he or she needs to call that number, and she doesn't want or he doesn't want to memorize so many numbers. You could provide a calling app for the user. So let's proceed. So in a calling app, there is a specific call process. Before, the only thing that the programmer would do is look at this box at the bottom, this make the call process. This is the only thing that the programmer would need to code before. But on newer phones, the one that's the Marshmallow or Nougat operating system for Android, requires now to for the programmer to explicitly ask the user for permission to make the call. So your code should ask the user to make the call, should ask the permission. So it's a little bit longer process now to create a calling app. So the entire process is check number one here at the box of the rectangular box at the top. So your code has to check if call has user permission. So your system or your app should check for user permission, and there is a decision back in the middle. If there is already a permission, so has permission, it's either yes or a no. If there is already a permission, for example, the app had already requested a permission before and permission was granted, your code could your app would call immediately the make the call process. So this entire process is called initiate the call. So but if there is no permission, your code should request call permission. So you have a procedure for requesting call permission. And if call request is granted, it redirects the code to the make the call procedure in your app, or that portion of your app where the code is making the call. So let's proceed. It's a little bit longer now. But don't worry, I have already broken down everything for you and it would be very easy to follow. So step one, you should first provide the needed permission inside your Android manifest.xml. So include the required permission for making phone calls. So one thing we should remember as Android Studio programmers is everything that we do, especially those that are not regularly done, we should always add the required permission inside our Android manifest.xml. So the required permission is uses dash permission Android name. So the name of the permission is android.permission.call_phone. So you just add this inside your manifest, Android manifest.xml. So step 2 is to create the blank procedures needed for the call process. So make sure that you have all your procedures for the call process. So you can set it as blank first so that you remember that you need to provide this procedure. So what are those? So here are the blank procedures of the call process. You have the public void initiate call. Actually, you can name it anything you want, but for my purposes, for the purposes of our lesson, let's call it initiate the call. And this initiate call procedure is the one that you would pass as a parameter inside your onClick. The onClick, the required onClick parameter inside your XML for your button that would be clicked by the user to initiate the call. So here it is, Android onClick. So the name of the procedure is initiate call. So don't forget to pass that to your button XML as an onClick parameter. And then next is a Boolean procedure, private Boolean check if already have call permission. So we have discussed that in the flow of the call process. You have to check if there is permission. Okay, let's go back. And the next thing is, since you have checked if there is call permission, if there is no permission, you need the procedure for requesting call permission. So thus you have a public void request call permission. So you have this one if there is, you call this procedure is being called if there is no call permission yet. And then in order to check the result of the permission, whether the user has provided permission or not, this public void on request permission result is automatically triggered without you calling it. So we'll discuss that later in the actual coding, or in the actual I'll provide you later the contents of these blank procedures of the call process. And if call permission has been granted as provided by this, as the information is provided by this public void on request permission result, if there is permission, then we call the make the call procedure, this one. So that's it. You have how many procedures we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you have 5 blank procedures of the call process right now, which we will populate with code later on. So the first procedure that we have discussed is the initiate the call procedure here, which we would pass as a parameter on the onClick XML for the button that would make the call in your app. So here is the skeleton code of the initiate call procedure. So public void initiate call. So you have public void initiate call here. So we use an if else statement. If check if already have call permission. So we have a Boolean procedure named check if already have call permission. We pass that as the one to be checked by the if. So all we need to do is to put the name of the Boolean procedure inside the parentheses of the if. No need to put anything else because this is already a Boolean procedure, and by calling that, it passes to us either true or false. So okay, we will be seeing the exact code of this check if already have call permission. So this is just a skeleton code right now. If since this is if, it's checking if true. If this procedure is true, if this procedure returns true, then inside the first if, we call the make the call procedure to make the actual call. But if this returns false, then we go to the else, which is request call permission. So that's it. So here is the skeleton code of the, actually this is not a skeleton code anymore. This is the actual code of the check if already have call permission. So let's change this. This is not a skeleton code anymore. Let's make it code object if already have call permission. Okay, let's save. Okay, so we have here an int. We declare an int named result, and this is the standard code provided by the Android documentation, Android developer documentation by Google. So we have this code. Just pass this code, context compat that check self permission, and then pass this, which means this activity, and then manifest that permission that call underscore phone. This is the same permission we have in our manifest. So it's basically just checking whether there is permission, and it passes the int to the int variable here, which is result. So we have an if else statement again. If result equals package manager dot permission granted. So this is standard coding here provided by Android documentation. And if it returns true, and then if this is true, if result is permission granted, if the result is equals to permission that granted, if this is true, then return true. If this returns false, then return false. So basically, this boolean would either return true or false. And then to our next procedure, this is not skeleton code 2. So let's change this to code of request call permission. Okay, so on the procedure for request call permission, so what's our previous one? Check if already have permission. If it returns false, for example, what was returned by this procedure is false, our initiate call would activate this procedure or call this procedure, request the call permission. Thus, we need to provide a code inside this request call permission procedure. So the standard code here is activity compat.request permissions, main activity.this, and then new string parameter. So inside this bracket is manifest.permission.call underscore phone, and then comma after the closing bracket 1. Actually, I won't be dealing much with what is really going on with this code, but the only thing that goes on here is that it's requesting for permission, and then after requesting for permission, this code automatically passes the ball or the control to this is not skeleton code 2. It passes the code here to the request permission result. So that this code would be able to provide the result of the request for permission. So this request permission result code has two cases here. It only has case 1 because it is private void on request permission result. So it just passes either 1 or 0. We have an int variable here named request code, and then it would pass either 1 or 0. So if 1, it means there is permission. If 0, then there is no permission. So we provided a case for 1 here, if request is cancelled, the request result arrays are empty. Okay, so we have int array here, grant results, and we have string permission array here too. Okay, so sorry, it always, the request code int is always 1. That is why we provided here case 1. And the thing that varies here is the grant results. Seems that that's the one varying here as provided by this code. So just copy this code, or I'll be providing this as text inside the discussion for this video. So don't change anything in this code, because this is standard in the documentation of Android Studio by Google for call permissions in a calling app. So it's here, if grant results int is greater than 0 and grant results is 0 here, the first index of grant results equals package manager dot permission granted, and then make the call. So it calls the make the call procedure. So there are two procedures that calls the actual make the call procedure, which makes the actual call. On our initiate call, if there is already permission as provided for this by this public boolean, check if already have call permission. This is a boolean procedure. If there is already permission, make the call immediately. But if you need to go to request call permission and then permission was granted, you make the call. And then else, if not, you provide a toast message like this: you have denied use of a call feature. So the user must be informed that he denied the use of a call feature. And then this is the skeleton code of the actual call, the make the call procedure. So you pass the telephone number. So for example, you have a telephone number that you want to pass. So different buttons should have different emergency call numbers should have different make the call procedure. Just change the name of its procedure. For example, make the call to police procedure, make the call to hospital procedure. So you create a different procedure for that. Just change the number. You don't need to change anything on the other parts of the code, just the number that would be passed. So you have here call intent that set data, and you have a URI here, and you pass, just get this entire code here, and you pass the telephone number. So it's here, you pass the content of the string telephone number, and then put the alert builder. You have an alert dialog builder here. You put them inside the try catch code block, so that if there are any errors or anything that causes errors would be catched by this try catch block. So we have here create a builder which informs the user of some things. So in my case, I create this builder so that I would be able to inform the user that she may incur some charges. So here is a message: you may incur some charges, would you like to continue? If true, so the only thing you may be wondering why I set the positive button as no, because the problem with Android Studio is that he puts the negative button on the left, and most users are used to having the yes as on the left instead of the right. So I mix up the code so that the negative button becomes the yes, and I just pass the because this is a yes, labeled as yes, I pass the start activity call intent here, so that the negative button labeled yes would make the call. and then the positive button labeled no would become the cancel the call. So it means the user would not proceed with the call. So that's it. And then if there is some exception or errors, you have a message your activity is not found. So the call would not proceed if that's the case. So just copy this entire code here and customize it the way you want. But the only customization that you need to do here is the number that you would be calling, because it would vary depending on the intended emergency number that would be called, or contact center number. So next, after we now have the call process here, we have added, I have in the original flow here, I just showed you the request call permission. But since we already know that there is a procedure that is a default that is automatically called by the request call permission procedure, so you can see here that when request for call permission is made, it automatically calls this permission request result procedure, and it is the one that passes the result to make the call. It is the one calling this make the call if call request is granted. And if it's not granted, of course, what happens here is, if it's not granted, you provide, nothing actually happens, but of course you need to inform your user so that he or she would not be puzzled why the call did not go through. So you provide, you have denied use of call feature here, but actually the user should not be puzzled with that, because he or she is the one that did not provide the permission for the call. So that's it. That's the end of my discussion. It's a little lengthy, but we are gonna provide a more detailed explanation of that on the actual hands-on of this calling app inside our Android Studio. So thanks for watching this video thanks for watching this video, and see you again on the next video of Android Online Academy.